I've met Paul Selig, the amazing channel, several times, and what I have for you today is another interview with him, this time about his latest published book, A World Made New. Now, of course, when I say his latest published book, it's the work of the guides. He is an incredible channel. I really do rate him hugely. When you think that the work that's in these books has had no editing after the words have been spoken, it is quite an amazing feat. His concentration and his willingness to show up for the guides that speak through him is remarkable. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. A World Made New. Position that for us, for anybody that doesn't really know you overly well.
Well, this is the 12th book that the guides that I work with have dictated through me. The very first book was called I Am the Word, that was dictated in 2009, published in 2010. All of the books are the unedited transcripts of their teachings. They sit down, they say, we have a book to write, and then they do the book. And the books, or the recordings are transcribed, and then they become the book. And they say, this is the end of the book, that's the end of the book. So this teaching, they say, completes the teaching that was begun with I Am the Word. And it's very much about how a world, our reality, which they say is the world that we know, they call it the common field, is reclaimed through a higher experience, a higher level of resonance and tone, which they support us in aligning to. So that is this teaching, and they've since continued. I just finished the dictation on the 13th book yesterday, which I wasn't expecting to happen so quickly, but it did. And so I'm just still catching up, but it seems that they have a lot to say, and they continue to say it when they're given the opportunity.
Fantastic. Because in fact, I noticed that towards the end of A World Made New, the guides do actually make reference to the fact that, you know, they're closing this chapter, as it were, excuse the pun, and they say it may take some time, Paul, but clearly not. It just came straight through then, did it?
Came straight through. I was on tour, and when I do a series of longer events, they have often used those as an opportunity to dictate a book because they have a group of students that are present for a period of time. The books are all done now in front of students. The very first 3 books maybe were done with me on the telephone, recording at my end with somebody in Berkeley, California. I was in New York in those days. There has to be an active listener. But when I began traveling more with the work, they began to take the opportunity to dictate the books in front of the students. So they do it online at times if I'm doing a live stream. So the epilogue for the current book, or the newest book, was delivered yesterday during a live stream. But everything else was dictated, almost everything else was dictated during live events. So yeah, they're going to do what they're going to do. If I'm showing up and I'm willing, that's fine. But they also say that what they're dictating now is using the first series of books as a foundation. It's an energetic foundation that allows them to go to this whole other place, which they seem to be doing.
So does that mean, in terms of the reader that wants to really dive into the guide's work through the 12 books, does it mean that really they need to start at the beginning, read I Am the Word, and work their way through?
They've said no. You know, they've said they teach in a one-room schoolhouse, and they're meeting the students where they arrive. So many people arrive late in the series. Some choose to go back to the earlier text, some don't. I found that when the work is speaking to people, they tend to invest in the time that it takes to experience the books, whether they're the audio books or the physical books themselves. But no, I don't think it really works that way. I mean, the books are really vibrational teachings, and they support people at the level that they can be in alignment or vibrational accord to them with.
Do you find, because you were over in London a few months ago, weren't you, doing some sessions over here? Do you find that different locations give you a slightly different feeling of the channeling process?
No, not really. I used to wonder about that. I mean, certainly if you're in a beautiful setting and it's peaceful and, I mean, you'll have an experience of looking at the beauty. But I really have learned with the guides that it doesn't matter. I mean, I was in the very first book, I was living in Manhattan on a busy avenue on like the third floor, second or third floor of an old apartment building with no real soundproofing. And I began to do what was to be a chapter for the book. And somebody started right outside my window with a jackhammer. And it was extreme. And I did the whole channeling with my fingers in my ears, thinking, well, this isn't going to be in it. There goes the book. You'd never know. It was perfectly clear, a perfectly clear teaching. So I've learned that how I'm holding up emotionally or where I seem to be sitting doesn't make that much of a difference. I have found, though, that when there is resistance in the room, it's harder. There's something that has to be overcome. And often when I start a class or a workshop and there are people there that are sort of checking me out and they don't know what to believe, and I can feel that sort of tension at the beginning, but the moment they start working with the energetic attunements, that all goes out the window and then it's smooth sailing from then on. They just bring the room to a level of coherence where they can work effectively.
That's interesting, actually, because somebody that I know that did come to one of your workshops there in London, her comment was simply, you can feel the energy. It is amazing. And so I get that as echoing what you're saying there. If you feel that kind of resistance from some in the audience, I suppose you've just got used to the fact that some will feel like that, have you?
When I first started working publicly, I was a college teacher. I was very private. I wasn't looking to get known for this stuff. But when I first started doing events, and I was not a known quantity at all, and there wasn't YouTube, videos out, and there wasn't any place to see me. And because the way that I work isn't necessarily that elegant, I whisper the words, I repeat them, my body's jerking all over the place. It's just, it's intense. And I'm not one of those channels, for whatever reason, that is sitting there going, here we are today and blessings. I wish I was, but that's not how it happens through me. But initially, I would have to deal with this sort of shock. Like, what is this? Is this guy crazy? Why is he repeating everything? I mean, all that stuff. But that was easily countered because I think the content of the teachings was always clear and has not really been, I think it's gotten clearer as I've been more refined as a channeler. But I think now most people who show up at something that I'm doing have done a little bit of homework. They've watched a podcast, they've seen a YouTube video, or they've read 12 books for all I know. But people come in far more ready for what this is, and with the understanding that this is going to be what it is and perhaps not how they've seen it or experienced it before. Some people, I suspect, are doing channelings that are all informational, which is great. And, the guides that I work with they're creating a context for the energetic teachings through language and through instruction. But they've always said that the real teaching is the energetic conversation that's happening with the student. And that's usually palpable for people. So I don't care in the way that I used to, perhaps what people think of this. I'm not out to prove anything. I've been through that. And that's not an interesting way for me to spend my time. I don't defend what I do. I used to, and get very unnerved when I would feel, I had an anthropologist once say in an interview, how do you know it's not you? How do you know? How do you know? And I had said, well, I don't know that I'm capable of sitting in a chair with my eyes closed and dictating entire books that require no editing. And the response was, but how do you know? And I was like, And then my guide showed up later that day when I was in a meditation, came barreling in and said, stop trying to tell people who you are, you don't know. Was gone. And that was kind of terrific. And I kind of stopped. It's like, okay, it is what it is. I may never understand it. I may not have to. I just have to show up for whatever this thing is and continue to as I'm asked.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You covered one of my questions that I haven't asked, which was I was interested in how audiences react to you now compared to the early days. But you covered that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, the audiences are larger, you know. I think also the old days of prove it or change my life today. I want everything to happen today and I want to be enlightened today because that's not what my guides teach. Has been replaced. I really feel very fortunate about the students that I work with or that are attracted to the guides' teachings because they're not necessarily, I mean, I always have to say this, I'm not a very good New Ager, I never really was. But this isn't a teaching about how to get more of what you want. It's not a teaching about getting more money or, you know, it's something very, very different. And so the people that are attracted to this work often have been through some of the other things and come to a different place or but I would suggest it's a spiritual teaching first and foremost. It's not a teaching of acquisition. And even though they teach things like, you know, becoming sensitive to energy and some psychic development in their work, they're really speaking about a very different experience of being with yourself and in the world and with source or God or whatever you want to call it. So, you know, I think it has changed and continues to change, I assume, as more people are attracted to the work.
I mean, I suppose I guess you said you feel fortunate in the type of people that come to you, but I guess they would be people that you mostly resonate with. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it?
I guess so, but you know, these books aren't beach books. You know, they're not fluffy. You know, they're transcriptions of an oral teaching. When you read them, it's very interesting because when the first time I actually read the books now is when I have to record the audiobooks. And the transcriptions have all been typeset and proofread and all those things. But then I sit down and I have to, that's the first time I really experienced the teaching. And I'm genuinely surprised at how much it feels like a book that was actually written, that somebody sat down and wrote. Because it's not, it's spoken. I hear phrase, 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 phrase. So the people that are putting the time in with this stuff already have some degree of patience. And I don't know that they're necessarily looking for the quick fix or the easy answer. I mean, I don't know a lot about mysticism, but I'm told the teaching is a mystical teaching. It's really about alignment at a level of awareness of one's innate divinity as expressed, in an expressed state. And so, you know, I just, you know, I don't know, maybe it's because I was a college teacher for so many years but you know, and I often don't know what people do. I don't ask people when they come to my events, what do you do? Unless they tell me. But, you know, there's a bunch of, you know, there's doctors, there's psychologists, there's, you know, there's all people in all professions that are showing up for this. And I remember for me what it was like when I was first opening up spiritually and I was discovering the things that were peppering the new age in those days, you know, crystals and this and that. It was all very, very, very exciting. And all those things are there. But I think people move to a place where they understand that whatever this stuff is, it's really about their experiential relationship with life and others and God, you know, and the tools and the other things are interesting. But I don't know that we necessarily have to rest there.
Your comment there about that, you're constantly amazed at the way the books feel as you're reading them. They feel as though they've been written, they've been crafted together as an expert author would craft a book. This one I dipped into the end because I wanted to see how the guys were finishing the whole series, as it were, and it's beautiful, isn't it? I don't know whether you remember the end of this, but it's absolutely beautiful. Language is fantastic.
Well, they're good orators. I know that. They use their language carefully. I don't remember the end of it. But I've just been so busy doing this other dictation that I haven't been thinking about it truthfully.
Are you still as excited by working with the guides as you were, early on?
How interesting. I don't think excited is the right word. I think when it began, I was incredulous when they first said that they had a book to write and if I took 2 weeks, they would do it. I didn't really believe that it would happen. And now it's happened 13 times. And so I have learned, I still get nervous, and because the rule with the books is we don't go back and change things. Maybe there are 3 words, 5 words, maybe in any manuscript that have been corrected, because I mispronounce them, or I used a sound alike because I thought they were going to say bequeath and not beseech, and I finished the word that I thought was coming. But for the most part, it's really very, very exact. And the rule, and I've been fortunate to have editors who've agreed that we don't get to go back and make it prettier. It just kind of is what it is. So I've come to a level of trust with them that they are going to deliver. That doesn't mean that I don't get frustrated with some of the teachings or confounded by some of the teachings because they're stretching my ability to accept what they're talking about, which is really a whole reclamation of reality beyond what we've known. Excited, I guess I am still excited. And I have to say, I'm really lucky because, I channel a lot. I'm channeling every week online. I do an online intensive every month. And then I do these events. And this is outside of the book dictations often. So there's a lot, but they're always progressing. The teachings are always going forward. So it's not like I'm having to plug in the old recording of the old class and it's going to be the same class. It's always a different class. They're always taking us a little farther or much farther. So that keeps it interesting. Excited, I don't know if I'm excited. I'm not fatigued by it. It takes a toll on me physically to do this. And when I do it a lot, which I have been in the last few months with a lot of travel and a book, I have to then integrate what I've learned and process it. Some of it's a physical processing, some of it's just, life changes, and I begin to understand their teachings in an experiential way, less so while I'm dictating. The students may be getting it while they're receiving the dictation, but I'm so busy speaking that I'm not listening carefully to the larger thought. I'm listening to each phrase. So yeah, I guess I am. But it's not the right word. It's like, it feels like it's a craft at this point. And, like I am still being honed to do this in an even higher or expedient, efficient fashion. I'm not stumbling the way that I used to, unless I get interrupted during a channeling, then I'll stumble because it's somebody kicks the phonograph player and the needle pops and I don't know what I just said and I panic. That happened the other day during a book dictation and it was a tough one. And I was, oh my goodness, but they were fine. I haven't looked at the transcript yet. I'm assuming it's fine. But, they usually sort of, doesn't matter to them. I'm the one that gets freaked out.
Yeah. I can understand that. Yeah, and I mean, is that are you see as a writer, which is and although you were also a college lecturer, that would suggest that your basic human character, if we look at it that sense, you would have a tendency. Now, I might generalizing here, but you would have a tendency to introversion, to be an introspective individual, and the amount that you put yourself out there would be very tiring or exhausting for a deep introvert. Do you feel any association with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I am an introvert. I live alone in the jungle on an island, and I don't know how to drive still. I failed my driving test 3 times, so I still can't get out of here unless somebody comes and gets me. So And I like it, I have to say. I'm not really complaining about it. This is enormously peaceful for me. And but I was, because I was a college teacher, I learned to show up in a role and in a certain capacity, which was to support others in their learning. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was a hammy kid. I was in the school plays, that part of me gets utilized here. But I often say, like, I'm a good host, but invite me to a party and I'll be sitting in the corner with my little paper plate and my little fork, being shy. And that's sort of just how I seem to be set up. And I'm not complaining about it.
But this is part of what the books are about, which is about finding the true self, finding that level of of being that each of us is comfortable with as ourselves, as human beings, and then accepting the reality that we're presented with, isn't it?
I don't know if, maybe. The guides say we're all operating with these frames, and the frame is how we perceive reality through our outline of what it should be. So if I say, people aren't safe, I will continue to claim into manifestation a world that supports that belief system. So I don't think that the books are about self-improvement. That's not really been it. They've often said that the small self or the personality self doesn't fix the small self. They're teaching something very different, which is a realization of the truth of who we are, which they say expresses beyond personality. Personality can be utilized in this. It's not abandoned, but they do say personality is reclaimed in a higher experience or a higher expression. So I accept my character, I accept my personality quirks, but I don't think that I'm my personality quirks. That's the difference now. I understand them, and a lot of them are just habit, and my character, I suppose, is maybe equivalent to my how the tint on my experience of this or that, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. The guides have said from the
Let me. Sorry, Paul. Sorry to interrupt you because you were just going to go off there again. But I was going to try and help you out there because I was just wanted to come back to the fact that you actually said you don't think that they're about self-improvement. Now, it might be that my understanding of self-improvement is a little off kilter, but I would have thought that any spiritual development, and the books are surely about putting the divine or putting us as in the reference to the divine, which is a spiritual development, would also equate to a self-development. Do you know? Again, I don't want to get too pretentious with the question, but you see where I'm going.
I do. The guides said, and I think it was in the very first book or somewhere, they say, we don't write self-help books. And my editor at the time said, I wish they would, but they don't. And it's not how to get the perfect mate in 30 days. And it's not how to have the body of your dreams. And it's not about those things. It's about something other. And I would suggest that what they're teaching is transformation, which is different than improvement. So you can think of improvement as I'm adding an addition to the house and I'm going to redecorate the living room and it's going to be nicer. They're taking the living room and lifting it to a whole other level of vibration and consciousness where your experience of yourself and the living room has been altered, which is different than putting a better picture on the wall. That's my
Yeah.
understanding.
Okay, thank you, because that has just clarified something very clearly for me. So that's really useful. Thank you. Okay, so A World Made New. Some people reading the title, they might feel, well, that's about the apocalyptic events that are inevitably going to happen, he says, putting that frame around it. It's not, is it? It's absolutely about transformation from a new understanding of the divine in everything. And in fact, I think don't they refer to it as the guides talk about God or everything coming as God? They use that expression of as. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Right. I mean, the book that they just finished is really gets into that in a different way. So I'll see if I can do it. With the aspect of self right now that perceives a world has been entrenched in common language, a common understanding, a legacy of history and meaning and morality of what things are based on what they were claimed as prior. You know, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, this is a nice watch, this is a cheap watch, this is a good relationship, that's a bad relationship. All of these ideas that we foster and perpetuate are known in a kind of legacy of history born in, the guides say, a false understanding or premise that we are separate from source and from each other. And that they've said in many books, the denial of the divine or the inherent divine is the only real problem humanity faces, and how we enact that. When they lift us in their work through the energetic attunements to what they call the upper room, which they say is the octave of vibration above the common field. They don't really talk so much about dimensions, they talk about octaves of tone. Common field is an octave. Our reality, as we understand it, is an octave. It has high and low notes. They say any piece of music can be transposed to be played in a higher octave, beyond what the ears can hear. And I mean, while on one level it's metaphor, on another level I think it's not. So what they're doing is they are supporting us in an act of transposition or transformation, so that the music that we are is being played in a higher way. Because the guides say we're always in energetic accord, and they say ACCORD or ACHORD is on a piano, we're always in vibrational accord with what we see. What occurs when we lift to the higher is that we're in a different level of accord, and we begin to see and experience the inherent divine beyond the veil of separation, which we have been party to, and supporting the recreation of again and again and again through our enactment of fear. So if you think about it this way, the view from the basement window is of the feet on the pavement outside your window. The view from the 25th floor is very, very different. When you're claiming a world from the 25th floor, you're seeing it without the obstruction or the veil of separation, and consequently, what is seen is reclaimed. They say that what you damn, which means what you put in darkness, who you damn, what you damn, damns you back. Vibrational accord. Who you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. You can't do it. It's just impossible. So when you're operating at that level of tone or vibration, or you are as the light, you are claiming the light in all that you see. When something is reclaimed in source or reknown as of source, God is the tree, God is the sky, whatever you want to call God, doesn't matter. You begin to reclaim the essence of the thing at that level. It is made new. And they say that is how a world is made new. It's made new through consciousness. So they've used the example that we've been at war for so long, since somebody picked up the first rock and threw it at somebody else, that we cannot imagine a world without war. It's what we've known, and so we've perpetuated like everything else. When you move to a level of consciousness where war is not a possibility, war is gone. You have no more war. You stop claiming it, you stop creating it, because you're no longer in accord to it, or vibrational accord. And that is in some ways this teaching, but they're really teaching about how this occurs and how matter is altered through consciousness.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If you think that the guides are referring to the process, as you've just wonderfully described, thank you for that, on a more esoteric level, but than this, which is that if you and I had both come to this Zoom connection today, maybe I just well, better example, maybe I just had a massive argument with my wife. So I came in here and I was really grumpy, not with you clearly, but it was still with me. And maybe you'd had a really bad morning so far. Now, our experience of our conversation would be very different to what I regard as quite a pleasant conversation right now. On a really simplistic level, do you not think that is sort of what they're saying? So, we meet together here at this point. We're not in the upper room clearly, but or you might be, but yeah, but yeah, right. We're here rather than if we'd been grumpy gits, we would be down here.
That's true. But I think there's a little more to it because you're still talking about this as occurring in the common field or the octave. And they're talking about this level of translation or transposition happening at a higher level of vibration. And so the attunements they work with are there to support us in an experience of the higher, and it is experiential. So I'm not saying that I walk around there all day long. I may say that I'm farther along than I think I am, which would be nice to believe after all this. But I continue to show up as best I can. But what you're describing is the difference between having a good day and a bad day and how that informs things. And that's actually important to understand, and it's very, very true. They're talking about moving beyond the references or the meaning that things have held that are sort of entrenched, which end up sort of reclaiming the old within. Here's the example. The gods say we're always ordering off of the menu of what we think that we're allowed. So if you think what we're allowed is good and bad days, and this is the distance between the two, that's all you're going to get. They're saying here's this whole other menu, and you can have an experience of this, but you need to align to it, and then it's available to you. But because we don't know we're allowed, we don't claim it. And that's what they're giving us, is the permission, and not only the permission, but I suspect the support and perhaps the instructions to how to manage this.
Because the overriding feeling is that, I mean, literally, the title, again, A World Made New. And that's where they're taking us, isn't it? That's where they're taking the reader, the student. They say, I'm pretty sure they say, it will take generations.
Yeah. They've talked about this a bit. I'm never I don't like, they say or have said that those being born are coming in with new awareness, where they're not going to align to deceit or to the old or to those things that were sort of created in hypocrisy and because of that, things will be altering. But they're also saying the energetic work is actually happening now. They've described it in an interesting way. They say it's as if you're all on a dance floor, and you're dancing to the music that you think has been playing all your life. And in fact, the music has been changed, but you're still operating as if the music hasn't changed. And consequently, it's clumsy because you're not in the right rhythm. You don't quite know, you're bumping into each other. But this is the process of things changing, and it looks like chaos and disruption, and it is. But it's party to a much larger process of change. But yeah, they've said generations. I accept that they say that. I am usually uncomfortable when they talk about time. But it's a concept that they talk about a lot right now. And, basically, we only realize source or God or whatever you want to call it in the infinite now. Now, not in some idea of tomorrow, some idea of yesterday. So they do talk about a process, and we're having to shift and understand what we can hold. And that also means hold physically in the body in terms of an energetic restructuring. But that others coming in are going to have more of this in place, I suspect, than we do now.
Paul, I could always talk to you for days, but I'm not going to. We'll start to draw it to a close. Is there anything that you would particularly want to express or say or share, or anything that you don't have to, but anything that comes to mind?
I'm in a funny place today because they finished a book yesterday. I didn't know that they were going to finish yesterday. I'd hoped they were going to finish the day before because I had a group of people here for the dictation. And I was hoping it would be done by the time they left, and then it wasn't. Then I was surprised that it was just done yesterday. Like, okay, what are they up to? But I'm not in a position yet to reflect on it because it's so current. And I am aware that they're finishing one book, and A World Made New is published, I don't know when this will air, but from the day we're speaking, 2 days from now, I think it's going to be out on the bookshelves. I'm going, okay. So I'm just sort of in this funny place with it all. I'm not an expert. I'm really not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm not ascended or enlightened. I'm this guy who has a facility that has been developed through a real commitment to working with it, that I hope is of real help to people. But the work of the guides is the work of the guides, and I'm their medium or their radio for their broadcast. So anything that I have to say is I'm happy to be along for the ride, and I hope people like the broadcast, and I hope it helps. That's about it.
You'll never step out of that humility, will you?
I just have no need to glamorize it. If I look more elegant doing it, I would find a way to glamorize it, but I don't. And maybe I should just be grateful for that. Maybe that keeps me humble. I don't know.
Oh, Paul. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed meeting with you.